It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought us to the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the powerful Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all of the people. A great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we are able to reason, we're able to talk to each other, we're able to listen to each other, and we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, back with Rudy's Common Sense. And today we have the great privilege of being in the old executive office building with Assistant to the President, Peter Navarro, who, as you know, is the Director of Trade and Manufacturing and the National Defense Production Act. He's the policy coordinator. But more than that, you know, he's one of the President's top economic advisors, advisors on trade and on domestic policy in general. And Peter has been very much out front, even before the White House, on China. So we'll begin with China.
Well, let me just say, great to be with America's mayor and one of the great warriors for this country.
Well, thank you, Peter. Peter, you've always been one of the people long before the White House, that was warning us about China. You're not new to the game, that we were giving away too much, making deals that were against our interests, making deals that were losing jobs and business. So now it turns out, we found out through COVID, I think American people had a shock when we found that 95% of our pharmaceuticals are made there, 80% of the drones are made there, like ridiculous numbers. And you've been working really hard to bring that back. First, tell me, how did that happen? How did that all slip away from us?
It's a long story. It's a sad story. It's a story that we can have a happy ending on if we do what we need to do now. My world in terms of China goes back to my days at the University of California. I was teaching business students who were in so-called fully employed programs. This is back in early 2000. And it was a time when communist China was allowed to join the World Trade Organization. Right. They did that in 2001. Joe Biden supported that, Bill Clinton supported that, a lot of the Congress supported that. And what it allowed China to do was have unfettered access to America's markets. And what I began to notice within the matter of just a couple of years, a lot of my students who were fully employed were losing their jobs. And
what business was it mostly?
This was Irvine, California, Orange County, with an unemployment rate at the time one of the lowest in the nation. These were good, solid, high technology type jobs. I mean, sweet spot type jobs. Bechtel, Cisco, and it's like, what's going on here? And so this is about 2003, 2004. I started to look at what was going on, and I asked the question, how was China able to sell products into the U.S. at half the price of anybody else? Right? This was, back then it was called the China price. And the prevailing view was it was just cheap labor, right? But it was like, no, this is more complex than that. And what my research at the time evolved into what became the China's 7 deadly sins that I would talk about in the White House. But
and the White House would be the Bush White House at that point.
This was the Bush White House. Yeah. But this what it was, Mayor, is that cheating. basically, stealing our intellectual property,
For years.
forcing the technology transfer, pollution havens, having these massive state-owned enterprises that strategically would target American industries and then use a combination of massive subsidies and then hacking their computers to steal their secrets. That's how Huawei came about. It was all a combination of massive Chinese communist subsidies and then theft, right? So that resulted in a book called The Coming China Wars, which basically reads today like a government report, right? It explained.
And when was that? What year was that?
That was 2006, and that was the book that the President Trump, would read, and in an interview in the Los Angeles Times, rated as one of his top 10 books on China, which is how I became then acquainted with the president and developed that relationship. But the point is that they went from GDP of a little over $1 trillion in 2000 to over $12 trillion today, okay? Fastest growth in an economy, and it was all at our expense. And much of that expense came in what we would come to know as the Blue Wall states, which President Trump won to become president in 2016. It's Pennsylvania, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan.
What did they take from them?
These were all the manufacturing jobs. And here's the thing, it's like if you take a manufacturing job, a final assembly job, and say an auto factory, you can't, the assembly doesn't just go over to China. All the supply chains go with it. The 7 tiers of the supply chains, the various components that go into making that automobile or airplane or whatever it is. And so what China did, communist, mercantilist, authoritarian China, what they did systematically is take us apart. So in the 2000s, what they did, they cheated and they stole our jobs. What they're doing today is the Communist Party lied about that virus and Americans are dying. So we've got an existential threat.
No doubt.
That is I think the greatest threat this country has ever faced. We have a president who's the toughest on China of any president in history, but it is in some sense a low bar because Obama, Biden,
nobody has been
Bush,
tough on China.
Clinton, all the way back to Nixon and Kissinger, the whole thought was that if you somehow trade with China, they would become like us. They would become more affluent, middle class, and the economic engagement would lead to peace and democracies. That was the state of play.
Did you ever believe that at an early stage?
Never. No, I mean, you write a book called The Coming China Wars.
No, I meant even before you noticed. Back in the 90s, let's say.
I'll be honest,
in the 80s.
it wasn't on my radar screen. I mean,
Right.
I was a macro economist.
Right.
My job was always to forecast the economy to help businesses manage the ups and downs of the business cycle and help investors figure out where to put their money. And it was the epiphany in after 2001 that if I was going to do my job correctly, I had to understand China.
Right.
And once I understood China, I understood that this country was in grave jeopardy because of what these 7 deadly sins are. And to be clear here, it's like every day as we speak, China, communist China, people in uniform in Shanghai are hacking our business computers to steal our trade secrets.
Right.
This goes on to this day, even though in 2015, over there in the Rose Garden, Xi Jinping, the dictator of China, came and promised Obama they'd stop doing it, right? They continue to steal our intellectual property despite the fact that the phase one deal. You remember that.
And now we'll take a short break. President Trump has a huge announcement for his top supporters. We will be celebrating the 2020 Republican National Convention this summer, and he wants you to enter for your chance to join him at the convention. If you win, the team will cover the flight, the hotel, and it'll give you a VIP pass. I'll give you VIP passes, actually, for yourself and a guest. All you have to do is text Rudy to 88022 today for your chance to meet President Trump at the convention. Again, that's me, RUDY, to 88022. to enter to win this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be his special guest. Paid for by Donald J. Trump for President, Incorporated. Welcome back to our interview with Peter Navarro.
They steal our intellectual property, even though they said they weren't going to do that in the phase one deal we signed in January.
The intellectual property theft we've known for a long time, 20 years. I did an investigation of their stealing from one of our major companies' intellectual property theft on a pharmaceutical product.
Yeah.
That was clear. And this goes back 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was one of hundreds.
Yes.
I don't know that we ever realized how much they acquired, like this 95% of antibiotics. But why was nothing really substantially done about the intellectual property theft? That was known. That's not a surprise.
That is the
why
big
did
question.
the Bush
It's
people and the
it's
the
half
Obama
$1 trillion
people do nothing
a year
about
they
that?
steal us? Well, first of all, we have to understand who controlled this country before President Trump got elected. Who controlled the White House? These are the multinational corporations that chase cost advantages, right? They don't salute flags. They chase cost advantages and kowtow to the Chinese and the dollar, right? So if it's easier to go to China for our supply chains, right? And here's the thing. Most of these corporate executives at the time were extremely naive. They would go to China and they would either think nobody was going to steal from us because that's not the norm, right? Or they thought they could outsmart the Chinese. Jeff Immelt, for example, General Electric, who drove one of the greatest companies in American history into the ground because he thought he could go to China and outsmart them, and they just picked him apart. So you asked me why we didn't do anything about it. There's a combination of greed and naivete. Mm-hmm. Very simple. And we still have that problem. It's like we can't think like them, okay? Most of us can't. The president certainly, he understands kind of how they think and what they're trying to do. But most of us kind of will say, well, it's peace. We can make peace with them. Trade's good. It's like so we're at a pivot point here, and for me, the pivot was January 15th. Okay, that was the day that the Chinese Communist Party sent over a delegation to sign a trade deal, which we had worked very hard to do, and it was a great trade deal that the president was able to lead on. The problem was, at that time, everyone who came over on that airplane knew that there was a deadly virus going around the world that was going to create a global pandemic, and they did not tell us. We're in a historic place now, but
this reminds me of Japan and
Cordell Hull,
the
famous
Second World War,
December 6th,
Pearl Harbor,
where the Japanese diplomats were in with Cordell Hull, and the planes were flying in the air. And it's like you can speculate about whether or not the Chinese intentionally or unintentionally let that virus go. I think from the lab, everything points to that P4 weapons lab. Okay.
So what you're saying is basically, in the Wuhan lab, it either was manufactured by them, which a lot of people doubt, or it escaped accidentally.
Right.
But they had a history. Remember, a year before, the UK filed a report saying that lab was very dangerous.
Correct.
For that very reason.
Correct.
Because they were negligent.
Right.
And way back, we banned laboratories like that and investing in laboratories like that under Obama because they were so dangerous. And then somehow NIH put millions of dollars
2015. And you know what they also did was
that was a pretty irresponsible
they changed
decision.
The policy on what's called gain of function. Do you know this? Gain of function, basically NIH basically said it was okay to pursue gain of function. Essentially it means you can go genetically engineer viruses to change how they work. They did that at the same time that they gave them money. But the point is that whether or not that was done intentionally in terms of...
It came out of that lab.
What was intentional, this is unequivocal, is they hid that virus from the world in terms of its pandemic potential for 2 full months. It was spawned in November in Wuhan. During December and January, they were well aware that this was human-to-human transmission. that would cause a pandemic, but they hid behind the shield of the World Health Organization. One of the things they did, which was reprehensible, was go out around the world and buy up all the personal protective equipment, including over 2 billion N95 masks. And that hurt New York directly, by the way, because when shortages emerged, that was part of the problem. But the other thing they did, which I think is pure evil.
It's like malicious insider trading.
Yeah, exactly.
At
Southern
a
District
deadly level,
Yeah.
not just money, but
Yeah.
deadly.
Yeah, but the other thing they did, which in my judgment is pure evil. This is pure evil. They shut down their country to all travel so that people who might be infected would not infect other Chinese. They did not shut down travel from China to the rest of the world. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Chinese nationals were flying around the world.
Now, that has to be, now this is my view, so you have to accept it, but that has to be deliberate to kind of even the score.
We have to ask that question.
Even the score. They knew this was going to be a big hit to their economy.
We have to ask that question.
They wanted to make sure it was a big hit to ours and everybody else's.
See, these are the questions that, I mean, look, we need to know, was that from the lab? Was it genetically engineered? How did it escape? Why did you not tell the world that this virus had human-to-human potential? Why did you let people fly around the world while you locked down your own travel? And, this is, again, it's like they almost destroyed our manufacturing economy in the 2000s by cheating. Right? That cost us millions of jobs. Now, by lying to us, they've killed over 130,000 Americans. They've put over 40 million Americans on the unemployment line. And the costs of what the Chinese Communist Party has done to us is in the trillions. And I think the American people are going to be asking the question, should China pay for that? And I think most of the people are going to say, heck yes, they should.
But you know what it reminds me of is, if those places that were losing all those jobs to China, and it was obvious, factories closing, industries closing, pharmaceutical companies moving, who was fighting for them?
Well, I can tell you who wasn't fighting for them.
Who was fighting? I mean, you would think the congressmen, and I have to say, most of them are from Democratic areas. Why wasn't someone yelling and screaming, you're taking 20,000 of my jobs, 30,000 of my jobs? To most of this was happening during Obama with a Democratic administration.
You know, there's a lesson here for this election cycle, because I remember the second book I wrote about China was called Death by China, and I did a film on it. And I specifically released the film in October of 2012, just before the election, and I released it in Ohio. And the whole goal
where most
there,
of the damage, a lot of the damage was done.
Exactly. The whole goal there was to get Romney and Obama being able to debate the China question, because my own view is, to your point, this should have been the salient issue of 2012. It's like, where did our jobs go? Romney could have won that election if he had recognized that. But what happened in that election, which was so unfortunate, was that Democrats were able to ensnare Romney and all this other distractive stuff,
Well,
the
would
social
Romney
issues.
have been a terrible opponent of that, or would he have been kind of soft on that
Romney
as a
was
free trader?
Romney was talking tough on China, and then they got him on the social equality issues and dragged him down in that morass. And that's what Biden's going to do or try to do, because this election, for me, it's about jobs, it's about China, it's about law and order with reforms. And all of those things are really about China, because think about this. If you look at all the anger, frustration, and fear that's playing out now on the streets of America, what are people really angry about? Well, being locked up, losing their jobs, getting the virus. Who's responsible for all of that?
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
Okay? So who should we be mad at? And I think that the left-wing media is doing a really overtime job trying to blame President Trump for everything, when in fact they give China a pass. But this is a...
Yeah, I tried to defend him by saying that President Trump, I've never seen him eat bats.
Well,
how could he be the source of this?
Yeah.
It's totally ridiculous. I think this would be a good time to take a short break. A good security system makes a family feel even more secure at home. Simply Safe does just that. It creates a secure home, and it's simple to operate. Simply Safe reinvented the home security industry years ago when they introduced a wireless system using Wi-Fi signals instead of running wires all throughout your house. That eliminates the need and expense for an installation crew. Simply Safe delivers you a pre-tested, pre-configured set of components that are easy to install. If you can remove crack and peel tape, you can install the system in less than 1 hour. 3 million families and counting in America rely on Simply Safe. Your doors and windows and rooms of your home will all be protected by the sensors and motion detectors. Their sound sensors and HD camera components as well. All of those parts are connected with wireless signals within your home, and once they're connected, you can activate Simply Safe's 24/7 monitoring service. All of that costs you just $14.99 a month with no contract to sign. That connects your system with the local police department for a fast response in the event of a home intrusion. It works in houses, condos, and apartments like mine. SimplySafe.com/Rudy is the site. You'll get a 60-day money-back guarantee and a free HD camera with your purchase. Just go to SimplySafe.com/Rudy and order it today. Don't wait. Thank you. Thank you for coming back, and we'll continue our interview. I've got to ask you this, though,
Sure.
Peter. It seems really odd that with this obviously an issue, that China, however they got there, has taken over 90% of some key industries for us.
Yes.
And we're going to have to extricate ourselves from that
Yes,
and
we
become
are.
independent. Isn't Biden too biased, soiled, corrupted by the fact that he took his son there on Air Force Two, lost every negotiation over trade, written up in the Times what an unsuccessful trip it was. But the Biden family had a nice week because they got $1.5 billion from the Bank of China.
They did, yes.
Now, why was that? How is that not relevant? The Bank of China became a partner with his son, Kerry's son, and Whitey Bulger's nephew. This is absurd, and it wasn't covered. And it does bear on, I don't know, you may think that Biden is honest, I don't. I think he's been a crook since the time his brother was making money in the Senate. I think he was a crook from the time he plagiarized in law school. I think once you plagiarize, it tells you something about a guy's character. And he repeated it again and again. His younger brother was making money off him when he was a senator, kind of like a grifter, and then he got up into the big leagues. But in any event, $1.5 billion is a lot of money, even for the Bidens, who had been stealing for a lot of years. Doesn't that just completely knock them out of any ability to do anything with China? They basically own them.
A question for you. You ever meet a con man?
Oh, many.
Did you ever meet a con man?
I made a career of it for a while.
Understood. Did you ever meet one that wasn't a nice guy?
Almost always a
surface?
nice. Oh, Joe
See
was
that?
a nice guy.
See that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, you got it.
No, look, 44 years in terms of dealing with trade policies. Voted for NAFTA, China into the World Trade Organization. As vice president during 8 years, he was the most traveled vice president in history to China. I don't know if you know this.
Second would be Ukraine.
So all yeah.
Places where the family was making money.
So all the time in those 8 years when the Obama-Biden administration was not doing anything to protect our manufacturing jobs, they lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs in 8 years. We gained 500,000. That just speaks to the fact that Biden is not the one that's going to stand up to China. We'll revert back to the mean. And the mean in this case is watching all our jobs go offshore to China. And you just kind of look at the people he's likely to recruit around, and people like Richard Haas or Susan Rice or whoever it is. These people are globalists. They don't care about working men and women. And but here's the thing. This election has to be about China, has to be about jobs, has to be about law and order. What they're going to try to make it about is the virus or whatever, race, whatever. And if we lose that battle, if we don't make it about what it really should be about, what the American people really want in terms of a solid America, that's where this election will be won or lost, in my judgment.
Doesn't it become different now, though? Because if I'm right, I just got these statistics. China had, when this started, about 97% of our pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
And 80% of our robotics and drones come from there, the drones.
Well, the drones, let's talk about the drones. One of the things the Secretary of Interior Bernhardt, he's one of my favorite folks. When I found out that all the drones that our agencies were flying were Chinese, I called up the secretary and said, hey,
we didn't know that.
That information's going right back to the Chinese militaries.
We didn't keep track of that as it was
happening?
We did not. CFIUS is supposed to protect us against a foreign, possible frenemy.
What he did in a matter of 6 hours is ground those. And we're, as we speak, trying to make sure that as a government we no longer buy those. But the pharmaceutical thing
that's what the president did.
Yes.
Unlike what the Clintons or the Bidens would do, which is get a big contribution to the Clinton Foundation.
Yes.
And let it go on.
Or nothing, or not have it on their radar screen. But the medicine thing is so critical here now. We are dangerously dependent on pharmaceuticals. We are dependent on medical supplies like masks and goggles and gloves, and we're no longer dangerously dependent for ventilators, but a lot of other equipment. And the ventilator story is one that shows how we can change things. But we've got an opportunity now with this Phase 4 bill coming up, where Congress could actually take some strong steps to bring our pharmaceuticals and PPE home. There's a bill that Lindsey Graham has out with Portman and Murphy and Brown that could easily be part of Phase 4. There's some other things you could do for medicines. There's a very interesting bill that Japan passed in April. You'll love this one. They offered massive subsidies to any company, any Japanese company that would bring home their factories from China to Japan. And so far, it's 90 companies and counting that have taken up their offer. So there's a lot of things we can do, but if we don't do that, we are going to kowtow and kneel to the Chinese Communist Party when it comes time to protect ourselves.
We'll take a knee to China, too.
I mean, that's what Joe Biden's been doing for years.
Right.
I mean, that's what this country has
been very successful for his family,
though. It's kowtow. It's like, and so...
I don't know, if your family was getting $1.5 billion, it might be a temptation. Although probably you wouldn't let your family do it because you're not a crook.
I told you a little earlier, in my earlier thing, I was like on CNBC for like 10 years as a market analyst and stuff like that. I only mention it because it's very hard to get the Chinese to give you $1 billion for your hedge fund, right?
Very hard to get $1 billion for any hedge fund.
Particularly if you're
I've talked to Schwartzman, I've talked to...
35 years. Yeah, I saw Hunter Biden. I mean, it's like
he's not Schwartzman.
It was like
Goldman Sachs.
He's Air Force Two is what he was.
Air Force Two,
and that's going to be
and a surviving drug addict. Let's face it.
Nobody should think that that's not going to be a major issue in this campaign.
Well, it better be because the press buries it.
Well, if he did that on his own, right, that would be one set of facts. But he did it with Air Force Two.
Brought him right out with him. and came away with all that money, and it has to put everything he does.
It's probably the only deal Joe Biden ever closed. Just saying.
Well, if you look at the three places he was point man, Iraq, he failed in Iraq to get a status of forces agreement, and we got a lot of people killed there. But the family made close to $500 million through James in a housing deal. In Ukraine, we failed to protect them against Russia. We failed to rid them of corruption. In fact, we added to their corruption. They made $14 million. And China, whoa.
I mean,
China, they made a fortune.
Come on,
this was a
Burisma. Huntersville works for Burisma. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
But I think the thing that's happened now that's different, it's an opportunity. I think the monopoly that China has gotten on some of our critical areas, like pharmaceuticals,
not
like
an accident.
Drones.
They go right at it.
But I don't think we
cheat.
I don't think we realize that, at least generally.
They think strategically,
I think
and we have not.
There becomes an imperative now to change that.
We have to.
And the question is, I think the American people feel that. It's got to be changed. We don't want to be at the mercy of China. We found out what that means. I think that becomes a major issue if we can make it that. Who has a better chance of extricating us from China? And there's no question.
I regret to tell you there's still some weak knees out there
even on our side?
No, they're certainly not inside the perimeter here. But
no, I mean in the Republican Party.
Look, this should not be a partisan issue.
Of course
to
not.
be clear. But the Democrats right now don't want to crack down on China because that plays to the president's strength. And some of the free trade Republicans are nervous about it. But look, this is existential. This is existential. And if we learned in the 2000s, I'll say it again, they cheated, stole their jobs. Right now, they lied, and people are dying. And if anybody in this country hasn't got the memo that the Chinese Communist Party is out to get us, then they should check their inbox again.
So now the recent executive order on Hong Kong, can you explain to us what that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's an issue that's very much on people's minds.
So it might seem like an abstraction, at least to some people, but here's why it matters. Like the human rights aspect is that China, about over 20 years too early, crushed Hong Kong democracy, right? But here's the thing, from just a self-interest point of view of America, for years, mainland China, with its capital controls and tight controls over their own financial markets, could not attract capital directly. So what they did was they used Hong Kong as a funnel to vacuum up capital and jobs from America. And we put up with it because we thought it was a sacrifice worthy to make to maintain democracy and freedom in Hong Kong. Now that deal's over. And so what the president did was several things. He basically stripped Hong Kong of all of its preferential treatment that allows it to serve basically as a useful idiot for China to exploit America. Number one. Number two, they have put in place the ability to impose both financial sanctions as well as visa restrictions on the various people both in Hong Kong and in communist China who were directly responsible for taking away Hong Kong's autonomy. And those sanctions can be crushing. The analogy here would be the sanctions that were just put on the one of the people in Xinjiang province where communist China keeps over 1 million people in concentration camps.
Right.
So that's what that did. So in a single day, the president kept yet again another promise. He signed the Hong Kong Autonomy Act that Congress passed unanimously, and then signed an executive order which initiated the end of Hong Kong's preferential treatment and these sanctions.
So how does all this affect the big picture of the overall trade deal with China?
The president has said it best. This was a great trade deal in normal times, but it would take hundreds of those trade deals in terms of benefits to offset the damages that China and the Chinese Communist Party have done to the United States of America by attacking us, unleashing that China virus. So where we stand now is that our expectation is that the phase 1 deal is still in place.
Right.
With respect both to the purchases and their promises about intellectual property theft. We expect them to continue buying our products, particularly our farm products. But we're in a Reagan world. It's a trust but verify kind of world. And certainly we cannot look at the Chinese Communist Party again in the same light of day post January 15th. Because remember, this was really a turning point for me. January 15th, they came here, shook our hands.
I could see that.
They got within 2 feet of the president and shook his hand. And I'm telling you, Mayor, by the time their plane was wheels up out of here and into international airspace, that was when they began telling us there was a problem.
And they knew at that point how deadly and
they
how...
knew in early December. And remember, what they did for 2 months, hoarded all the personal protective equipment.
Yes.
And pure evil, put Chinese nationals on gleaming, shining attack aircraft. I mean, this should hit close to home for you. You remember the Twin Towers better than anybody.
I would say
okay. And you tell me if the Chinese Communist Party knew what they knew when they knew it, locked their own country down for travel, and then sent Chinese nationals to New York, Milan, and everywhere in between, you tell me what that was.
Yep. Now, how do other nations react to it? Is there, at least at the beginning, there seemed to be a great deal of anger toward China. In Europe, is that still there, or is China trying to buy its way out of it?
It's a mixed bag. The problem is that China has one of their biggest weapons is called debt diplomacy, right? This is their ability to offer massive sums of money to whatever country is willing to give them whatever it is they need. So, for example, you might think of Europe as a united kind of thing, right? Now, if you look at Greece, right? Greece is a fiscal basket case. It sold one of the prettiest ports, the most strategic ports in the world, to the Chinese Communist Party, right? Italy, another fiscal basket case, is deeply, deeply, deeply in the pocket of the Chinese Communist Party. Germany doesn't need their money, but Germany needs their trade. It's something like Germany is like dependent for I think over 40% of their economy is dependent on trade, international trade. That's a huge percentage, and much of that is with the Chinese Communist Party.
Now, there's no sense that the loss of so many people, I mean, their citizens were slaughtered, clearly by the Chinese. Will change that? I mean, there's a question, is there anything left to Western Europe? Is there a conscience left in Western Europe?
We see some solid signs. For example, on the Huawei issue, we're seeing, for example, the United Kingdom just reversed their policy and now has taken a hard line. But we also know that the Cameron government and London are deep in the pocket. The old Cameron government. Right. And London, as a financial center, are deeply in the pocket of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is a fight on every front. China, what drives me crazy sometimes is, I walk around this town, right, and people like start saying how bad China is, and it's like, where were you in 2006 when I wrote exactly that? I mean, in 2006, I had a whole chapter on how China had compromised every single country, over 50 countries in Africa.
Sure.
And it's like, it's not too late, but I can tell you this. If President Trump is not reelected and Joe Biden becomes the occupant of the Oval Office, it's over for this country. It's over. We might as well put a Chinese communist flag right up on top of the White House and Capitol Hill. And that's what's at stake here, because money talks, and China's got a bunch of it. And these corporations, you probably heard or watched or read Bill Barr's speech last week, the Attorney General, and he called out corporations by name, the Apples, the Googles, the Microsofts, who basically put their own
look at the NBA.
Monetary interests above
sports, NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. But I also noticed that last week Joe Biden plagiarized the
Buy
Trump,
American thing. Yeah,
the Buy America program. That's the first time.
My office is the tip of the spear of that office. He's been so I was particularly
by
annoyed.
China, by Ukraine, by Europe, by any place else but America.
It's a little annoying.
Now, but the Buy America program, almost word for word, like Neil Kinnock's speech or the law review article he plagiarized in law school.
Yeah.
But that's the highest form of flattery.
It is. The other thing that annoys me about Joe Biden, and if he keeps saying it, we're going to bust him wide open on this, is his claim like, well, if I were president, I would have used the Defense Production Act. Hey, this president has used the Defense Production Act in 50 different ways to achieve the most rapid industrial mobilization since World War II. And so it's another example of how this guy is either out of touch with reality, Biden, or he simply tries to steal the president's thunder. And, I mean, the problem we have, and let's be honest about this, almost every single media outlet out there in the television land is against the president. It's just one constant, never Trump, anti-Trump spin. And you put the TV on every morning, and it's like the talking points for the DNC, Biden.
Much worse than it's ever been. And
it's out of control.
Having been involved in 2016, this is much worse than 2016.
This is out of control. It's absolutely, positively out of control, and shame on them. I mean, there's no journalism left anymore.
But aren't they part of the problem? I mean, aren't they part of the? Look, I'm a prosecutor, so I see it as a conspiracy. This is a conspiracy to change our government to make it. Richard Haas, you mentioned Richard Haas.
Yes.
Richard Haas, I think, would rather see a United States of the world.
Yes, he would.
With somebody in Paris or in Geneva, maybe Obama could be, president of the world, and then America could just we could contribute our.
I think you're right.
We could contribute our little thing, but we're so bad. I mean, we're such a bad country. We were founded by a bad man. The man who led our revolution is another bad man. The guy who authored our independence, he's another bad man. I mean, they're all bad. All these Americans are evil. So you got to have like a.
See, here's the thing about.
This is a very sick philosophy.
Here's the thing about the China virus. This is the most difficult issue a president in our history has ever faced because it's a double bind. Okay, if on the one hand you lock everybody up and shut the economy down, right? You may save lives directly by reducing the amount of people who get the virus, but you kill a bunch of people.
It has to be.
Through alcoholism, depression, suicide, there's all sorts of abuse going on.
Or tests they never went to.
Okay? So on the other side of that is if you open up the economy, right, you're going to have more people get the virus, and so you'll see people die directly from the virus, but you'll have a stronger economy. But on net, there's no question about this. You're better off opening up.
Of course
right?
you are.
But whichever you do, you're going to get criticized.
Right.
Right? And that's the problem that the president is having to deal with now. And I would simply say to the American people, remember where this thing came from. Mm-hmm. This is the Chinese Communist Party. And ask yourself, are you going to allow the Chinese Communist Party to destabilize our political system? Who should you be angry at? Should we be angry at each other and start a cultural revolution and burn down our cities? Or should we get together as a country, fight the real enemy, and have an election that we can have a rational debate about what really matters? And I think what really matters, and what matters to this president, he's the greatest jobs president in history, is jobs, China, and law and order. That's it. So It's
So
a
how do you
double bind.
how do you see the economy in the next couple of months? Because that'll be a factor one way or the other in the emotions that people have.
We're going to continue to rebound from where we were. There's
Right.
no question about that.
But it does seem, and excuse me if I'm being too cynical, that a lot of this desire to keep things closed, a lot of this desire to exaggerate the impact of the continuing virus, where the fatality rate has gone down to
Yes.
below a lot of other things that you were talking about that can kill you. I think a lot of that is to affect the election.
I think it'll be really interesting. Like, we are a one nation under God, but I think we're going to probably see slower growth rates in the blue states than the red states, precisely because of this underlying difference of how fast you open up. But here's the thing: we're gonna continue to bounce upward, but we're facing significant structural changes brought about by the China virus. And as a mayor of the biggest, greatest city in the country, that China virus hit the twin pillars of city greatness, right? High-rise density and mass transit.
Right.
And what you're going to see, and what we're seeing, is service sector refugees that are going to leave these cities because of the blows to the entertainment and hospitality industries and others. So the only way out of that is really to have a president who understands how to create manufacturing jobs. Because if we don't create those manufacturing jobs, those service sector refugees are going to have nowhere to go. So when you ask me what the economic outlook is, it's like, yeah, we're going to continue to go up, but by election day, we're going to still have a long way to go. And if we wind up with Joe Biden, we're going to have a slow to no-go economy, a crashing stock market. If we stick with President Trump, we know he knows how to build an economy. He built the greatest economy in American history. At that point, just before the Chinese came on January 15th and lied to us, lowest unemployment ever, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, wages rising.
And the recovery has been at least a lot better than anticipated.
I think that's true. I think
his enemies did him one great favor by making such dire predictions. We were going to lose 8 million jobs, we gained 2.5 million. We were going to lose 4 million, we gained 3 million. I mean, it's constant.
Well, that's because we opened back up too.
Right.
Let's be clear about that. And again, the calculus there for those who are listening and watching this is, please remember, more people would die in a lockdown economy than an open economy. That's just real because of the alcoholism, depression, and suicide. So, but I would rather people understand that come election day, there's still 3-4 years of recovery that we're going to have to work our way through because
including
of all these
straightening out the
structural
relationship
effects.
with China. That's a long term.
Including that, and that's why this election. I mean, I'm sure everybody says this every time there's a presidential. It's most important in history. This is the most important presidential election.
Well,
in
you know
history.
why I think that is?
Hands down.
I think, despite all the great prognosticators who say it's about coronavirus, I think something else has happened that's even more critical to the American people, and that's law and order. I think the American people sitting at home watching what's happening in democratic cities, 60 shootings in Chicago again this weekend, something close to that in New York.
It's a bloodbath.
Last week in New York, there was a 130% increase in shootings. 130% increase in shootings. 1-year-old boys being killed. A woman who asked her neighbor to please not shoot off the fireworks gets shot in the brain.
She got shot 8 times, by the way.
Yeah, and the complete unwillingness to Black Lives Matter to give a darn about black people who get killed in any other way than by the police, which they can exploit, which is less than 1% of 1%.
For me, this is.
And we've got to save them, and we can. I did. I saved more African American lives than any mayor in history, and I did it by sensible law and order programs. not letting people out on bail, putting people in jail that belong in jail, using police officers to seize guns. The president's the only one who gives us that hope of, I think, of surviving the kind of nation we are. They want to change us completely. They're against the nuclear family. They want government ownership of property. They want black people to be paid salaries for the rest of their lives, nobody else. They want to do away with private schools. No private schools, gone. Basically, it's a complete Marxist document to change the nature of our government, to overthrow our constitutional government. He's the only one speaking out against it. Ultimately, I think that's going to be the issue. People can't watch all this violence. There's fear now to come to my city. For 20 years, New York City was the safest large city in America. I made it that way, and Bloomberg kept it that way. And this idiot de Blasio, who thinks just like Biden, changed it in a matter of 2 months with his progressive policies. The progressive policies are let criminals out of jail, don't have bail for them, never ever prosecute a drug dealer, even a guy selling millions of dollars worth of drugs. Well, probably because they're giving money to Black Lives Matter, which is sponsored by a terrorist who I convicted, Susan Rosenberg.
Yeah, that's the most amazing.
Sponsored by a terrorist who was engaged in an organization called the Black Panthers, who were notorious for slaughtering police officers. And that media presents them like they're some kind of civil rights group. They're a Marxist, terrorist organization designed to overthrow the United States.
There's 3 revolutions to think about. Choose the one you want. American Revolution was about liberty and freedom. The French Revolution was about burying history. And the Chinese Cultural Revolution was about wiping out all of culture. What we've got now is a combination of the Chinese Cultural Revolution and the French Revolution.
Right.
Heads on pikes, burn the books, topple the statutes, erase our history. What we need is a return to our roots and understand where we came from.
Yeah, great history.
That's the revolution we came from, freedom and democracy, not this stuff
and the ability to handle bad things every country does terrible things. Most of them can't handle it. We handle it. Our history has shown that even if we've done evil or bad things, we recognize it and we change it. It may take us a while, but we change it. Nobody else does that. I mean, why are we the country everybody wants to come to, and nobody else? We got to be doing
there
something
is that
right.
point. We're so bad that it's the only
we
country
have to have
in the
our
world
flag.
people want to come
We're
to.
the only country that anybody wants to come to, and we have people here who want to burn our flag. It makes no sense. And I think he stands for those people at home who don't participate the same way as the protesters. But I think they're stronger people. We'll see. Peter, you have been just one of the bright stars of this administration.
I appreciate that, sir.
Working on an endemic problem that actually with COVID really came to the fore. I don't think people realized what China was doing to us until they heard they control our medicines. They control our medicines at a time in which they got us ill. Wow. So I don't think this is going away. This is going to have to be solved.
If I had my way, and I'll leave you with this, COVID, I wish nobody would ever say that word anymore, or the coronavirus. You know what I want them to say? The China virus.
Of course, it should be the
Chinese Communist Party virus. The CCP lied.
Well, I will try to remember
and Americans died.
Even better than Wuhan, because nobody knows what Wuhan means.
Every
I think it might be a restaurant.
Every time we say COVID, it's like an abstraction, like it just kind of came to us, some kind of just coincidence.
Well,
when you say the China virus or the Chinese Communist Party virus, it puts the blame right where every American should put it, because it links between what's going on in this country and where that other country is trying to take us. And if we don't put that 2 and 2 together, we're fools.
Yeah, and it creates a challenge for us to extricate ourselves from their control.
That is
because
right.
they should have no control over us.
That is right.
That's too dangerous for our people.
It's been a great pleasure.
It has been, Peter.
It's been a great pleasure.
This is a great opportunity for me to congratulate you on the great work that you've done.
appreciate it.
Thank
sir.
you, and we'll continue to do it.
All right.
Well, that was an interview with Peter Navarro, who, as you can see, has a comprehensive understanding of these issues and a very, very positive approach to them about how to change them, how to solve them. And you can see why he's of such great value to President Trump and why they're very much on the same wavelength, because I know President Trump for 30 years, and this is the kind of man that he's going to get along with. So we'll be back with another episode of Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense very shortly. Thank you.